Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Chambers. On December 6, 2014, at 20:09, emergency services responded to a report of a car on fire in a rural area. The first firefighters to arrive discovered a burning car and began extinguishing the flames immediately. The interior of the car was filled with thick black smoke that rose rapidly. As the rescuers poured foam on the car, they accidentally saw a dark figure slowly emerging from the nearby bushes. The figure looked like a young woman. The fire department approached and discovered that it was a young woman. She was severely burned, wearing only her underwear. The extent of her injuries, with burns covering her entire body. Her clothes had been burned, her skin was melting and slowly dripping, and her entire body was bleeding. Her hair had turned into a black ash, and her face was black with soot. Rescuers carefully wrapped the young woman in a blanket as she lay on the ground, waiting for paramedics to arrive. Firefighters were at her side, tending to her. Although she could barely move her lips due to the severity of her injuries, the woman still managed to speak. When asked for her attacker's name, some emergency responders heard the names Derek or Derek. She was airlifted from the small town to a hospital in Memphis. Unfortunately, the young woman's condition became critical. With approximately 93% of her body burned, she died from her injuries just 4 hours after arriving. The victim was identified as Jessica Chambers, a 19-year-old local resident. Jessica grew up in Cortland, where her mother and grandmother lived nearby. Her father and stepmother also lived in the same town but in a different location. She was a petite woman, but Jessica had a strong and determined personality. She experienced a rather complicated living environment. About her family, her father pleaded guilty to manufacturing methamphetamine and was arrested for drunk driving in the early 2000s. In 2006, her 28-year-old neighbor was shot multiple times in her yard. Growing up in such a negative environment, Jessica developed a rebellious personality. She smoked, argued with her parents, had unstable relationships with boyfriends, and had legal troubles. Jessica's behavior became more evident at the age of 17, after the death of her brother Alan in a car accident in 2012. She moved out of her mother's house a few months later because her mother did not approve of Jessica's new boyfriend. Jessica's childhood was very difficult. Her father was in prison for a while, but in 2014, he was released and worked as a mechanic at the local police department. Jessica used to deal illegal drugs and had ties to local gangs. However, Jessica is sweet and funny, and is respected and loved by most people. News of a burning car quickly spread throughout her small town. Jessica's father was quickly notified of the car fire. Upon hearing the news, he rushed to inform Jessica's mother of the tragic incident. They rushed to the hospital. Jessica's death shocked the nation, attracting widespread attention. Hundreds attended her funeral on December 13th, a memorial service to honor an active and ambitious teenager who had been a cheerleader and had big dreams. A thorough investigation into the high-profile case was launched, attracting great public interest. To assist local authorities, the FBI, ATF, and the U.S. Marshals were called in. Initial investigations suggested that the fire may have been caused by a car accident, but this theory was quickly dismissed. A closer inspection of the scene revealed no signs of emergency braking or obstructions, and an examination of the burned-out vehicle revealed no damage or signs of collision on the body. Arson therefore became the leading theory, but the police faced a challenge due to a lack of clues and evidence, slowing down the investigation. Following her death, some believed that Jessica had inadvertently put herself in danger by associating with a local gang. However, gang members have strongly denied any involvement and sent condolences to Jessica's family. The police have summoned several people for questioning, but have yet to gather any clues. The investigation has stalled. No suspects have been found, nor a motive for such a brutal act. Public pressure for the investigation to seek justice has slowed the investigation and continuously provided false clues about Jessica's life. Several theories have emerged on social media, suggesting that Brian Rudd, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from high school, may have acted out of jealousy. Another theory is that Jessica sold low-quality drugs to someone for a few $100s, potentially angering a drug dealer who sought revenge. District Attorney John Champion described the case as the most mysterious he has worked on in his 22 years in the county. He has been investigating Jessica's case since December, working with local police and multiple agencies, including the MBI, FBI, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshals Service. During the investigation, they interviewed more than 130 people, some of whom have since been re-interviewed, including individuals named Eric and Derek. Despite these efforts, no suspects have been arrested. Police have recreated the final week of Jessica's life in detail. On December 5, 2014, her last day, Jessica received a cell phone call from a friend, urging her to drive to the M&M Mini Mart. There, she purchased $14 worth of gas and left at 5:15 p.m. About 30 minutes later, at 5:45 p.m., she contacted her mother to say she would be home soon. At that time, Jessica had her hair tied in a bun and was wearing camouflage pajama pants. After a few more stops, including one at an unidentified house and another in the nearest town, Jessica arrived at the location where her life would tragically end. It is likely that the person who would eventually take her life was in the car with her at the time. Meanwhile, surveillance footage captured a man in a striped shirt filling a gas tank and then driving off in the same direction as Jessica. Despite this clue, no further information about the man's movements after that point was available. Jessica's cell phone records revealed important information about her final moments. They indicated that she spent approximately 10 to 15 minutes near a stoplight on Highway 2, heading toward Batesville. However, there was an unexplained 62-minute gap between 6:30 p.m. and 7:32 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., her phone was at the location on Heron Road where her burning car was later discovered. Many questions remain about what Chambers was doing during this mysterious hour, and what ultimately led to her tragic fate. The investigation was slow going. It wasn't until December 2015, in a separate case involving charges of illegal possession of weapons, narcotics, and counterfeit goods, that 17 suspected gang members were arrested. At the time, District Attorney John Champion did not expect any gang members to be directly involved in the arson. However, during plea negotiations, gang members were given the opportunity to cooperate with the investigation. As a result, they identified Quinton Tellis, a man who had been with victim Jessica about an hour before the fire. In February 2016, police temporarily closed the case to conduct a further investigation and determine the motive behind Jessica's disappearance. The lack of an official suspect led to a surge of unfounded speculation circulating online and throughout the town. As a result, the case attracted the attention of the police online, and a Facebook page called Justice for Jessica was created, offering a $50,000 reward for any information or clues that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. Rumors also circulated online that Jessica, who had previously dated African American men, had been targeted by white supremacists for her involvement in interracial relationships. However, others suggested that the perpetrator was African American because Jessica had been in a gang, and that she may have tried to leave and was killed. None of these theories were ever officially confirmed. After examining Jessica's cell phone and social media activity, police were able to discover who she had been communicating with in the hours before her death. The investigation focused on Quinton Tellis, who initially claimed that their meeting had been arranged and communicated via text message, and that he barely knew her, simply asking her for a ride home. However, Further analysis of their messages uncovered inconsistencies in his story, leading to his arrest for the arson murder of Jessica Chambers. Text messages showed that Quinton had sent Jessica several intimate advances on the day of the tragedy. The timeline of events began when Jessica texted Quinton at 9:02 a.m. to say she had just woken up, and Quinton replied shortly afterwards that he had also woken up. Then, at 10:09 a.m., Quinton texted Jessica saying, "I'm ready." After the text, Jessica drove to the M&M gas station and was captured on surveillance footage leaving M&M a few minutes later, presumably to pick up Tellis. They then picked up a friend of Jessica's around 10:49 a.m. Jessica dropped Quinton off at around 2:03 p.m. Quinton sent Jessica another text, this time apparently asking for some affection. It was the fourth time in 4 days that he had asked for intimacy via text. Deleted texts were also recovered, including, "I'm so horny," and "Come lay with me," but Jessica did not respond. The passenger seat in Jessica's burned car was found reclined, a common position for intimate activity in a vehicle. Prosecutors used this as evidence to suggest that the two had engaged in or attempted to engage in intimate relations on the night of the incident. Quinton was charged with arson and Jessica's murder on February 24th. Building a solid case took time. Quinton Tellis' trial began in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi, about 50 miles south of Memphis. To ensure safety, the trial had strict security measures in place, including segregating the jury and using metal detectors to screen attendees before they entered the courtroom. Prosecutor John Champion warned the jury that they would have to see horrifying images of Jessica Chambers' burned body and hear testimony from about 35 witnesses. According to police, Jessica met Quinton on Thanksgiving in November 2014. Quinton was 7 years older than Jessica at the time and had previously attended the same high school, which she had started in October 2014. Quinton had recently been released from prison, where he had served time for burglary. In court, prosecutor John Champion presented evidence of a series of text messages exchanged between Quinton and Jessica, including one on the day of her death in which Quinton asked for intimacy. And the front seat position of Jessica's burned car was found to be adjusted downward, consistent with the text messages found. Prosecutor John Champion claimed that Quinton attempted to end her life by strangling her, then, thinking she was dead, doused her with gasoline and set her on fire. A friend of Jessica's reported that the three of them spent the day before the incident driving together in Jessica's car. On the day of the incident, Quinton eventually admitted to police that he had seen Jessica that night and had gone to a fast food restaurant with her. However, Quinton claimed that he had an alibi, saying that he was with friends at the time of the fire. However, the friends he claimed to be with did not verify his alibi. Interestingly, a store surveillance camera captured Quinton a few miles away, buying a phone card for an acquaintance in Louisiana. FBI Special Agent Dustin Blunt revealed that Quinton had deleted Jessica's contact information and their text messages from his phone shortly after her death. When asked about this action, Quinton claimed that he was not trying to hide anything. He explained that he had deleted her contact number because he did not want to keep a deceased person's phone number in his phone since it would no longer be used. Notably, records show that Quinton sent private text messages to Jessica on the day of her death. FBI agent Dustin determined that Tellis and Chambers met through a mutual friend at a gas station in their hometown of Cortland. The two spent time together frequently, often driving around. Notably, Quinton lived with his mother in a trailer near the convenience store where Jessica was last seen before her murder. Notably, his DNA was found on Jessica's keys, and cell phone records confirmed his presence at the location on the night of the murder. Quinton, who maintained his innocence throughout the trial, was told by defense attorney Darla Palmer, who advised the jury to reject the cell phone location evidence, that it did not prove Quinton and Jessica were in the same place at the same time. Quinton repeatedly proclaimed his innocence to police. Even when threatened with the death penalty, He told police that he was telling the truth and was incapable of harming anyone. His family believes that police unfairly targeted Quinton due to the highly publicized racial tensions surrounding the case. To determine whether Jessica's murder was related to other recent fires in the area, police looked into possible connections to fires in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. However, no connection was found. Despite this, the investigation has yet to produce conclusive evidence about a motive. Police said they have pursued several theories but have made little progress. Typically, identifying a suspect in a homicide is a relatively quick process, as law enforcement often relies on witnesses and informants on the street for leads. In this case, despite extensive community cooperation, DNA collection, and polygraph testing, no arrests have been made. Quinton Tellis' 2017 trial ended in a retrial. By the time the retrial began in 2018, Quinton was facing new investigations in Louisiana. He was being investigated for possible involvement in the death of student Ming-Chin Xia, as well as for using stolen bank cards. In May 2019, Quinton was formally charged with second-degree murder in connection with the death of Ming-Chin Xia. Sherry Flowers testified at the second trial that she picked up a hitchhiker the night of the incident. However, she did not recognize Quinton in court and admitted that she did not know the man she picked up. According to Sherry, a man flagged her down, and she stopped. She agreed to give the man a ride, describing him as a thin to medium-sized African-American man in his 20s. This description did not match Quinton, who was 26 at the time and 5 feet 9 inches. When asked why she did not contact the police in the first place, Flowers explained that she could not remember the incident and did not think it was related to the case. Prosecutors claimed that giving a hitchhiker a ride gave Quinton the opportunity to return to Jessica's car and set it on fire. However, the defense disputed the timing of the trip, arguing that the driver, Sherry, was unsure of the exact time she picked up the hitchhiker, only remembering that she had picked someone up. During the investigation, Jessica's car keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death, near the location where the hitchhiker was picked up. The defense objected to admitting the keys into evidence, arguing that it was impossible to prove where the keys had been before they were discovered. During Quinton Tellis' retrial, the jury visited the crime scene and heard additional testimony. The second trial was extremely emotional. Witnesses broke down on the stand, and spectators wept as pictures of the young woman, Jessica Chambers' burned stomach and face, were shown. Despite a second trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, deadlocked for the second time in 2 years on the question of Quinton Tellis' guilt in the arson of Jessica Chambers and her car. Although the suspect has been tried twice, no verdict has been reached and the case remains officially unsolved. Online police continue to search social media for any clues that may have been overlooked. Jessica Chambers' death initially attracted significant media attention. Over time, as media interest waned, the story attracted the attention of internet police around the world. One aspect of the case that remains widely discussed is what happened to Jessica between the time she left home and her death. On the night of the incident, Jessica left home at 5 p.m. and told her mother that she was going to a nearby gas station. Surveillance footage from the gas station shows Jessica visiting the station twice. The footage shows Jessica filling up, then walking toward the store and waving to someone off camera before approaching them. The identity of the person Jessica waved to on the day of her death remains the subject of much speculation. A personal tragedy becomes a public spectacle when it evokes widespread compassion and support. The Justice for Jessica Facebook memorial page, run by Jessica's half-sister, is a prime example. The page brought together people from around the world who were moved by the tragic story of a young woman burned alive. As a result, Jessica's family and friends received an outpouring of support in the form of letters, words of encouragement, and donations. People also donated gifts and books in her name. A memorial quilt was made of bright pink patches with a zebra print, along with her photo and her birth and death dates. The quilt was particularly notable because it was made by well-wishers from all over the world. One mysterious detail about the quilt was a square stitched with the phrase "secret group," a phrase whose meaning remains unknown to this day. No one has yet been held accountable for Jessica's tragic death. Quinton Tellis, a 29-year-old man already serving time for another crime, remains a suspect, but justice for Jessica has yet to be served. Sadly, Jessica's mother, Lisa, passed away on October 29, 2021, at the age of 52, without being able to see justice for her daughter. The possibility of a third trial in Jessica's case, which involved the horrific act of being burned alive, remains uncertain. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Wilson. Lindsay Wilson was a kind and loving young woman. Lindsay had a deep-seated need for connection and love. Her major misstep was that she misjudged her partner and invested herself in their toxic relationship. Lindsay was 17 when she found out she was pregnant. Growing up in a loving and supportive family, she had never expected to become a mother so young. Although she was emotionally mature, what made it even more difficult was that her boyfriend, whom she had been dating since she was 13, abandoned her as soon as he learned he was going to be a father. His sudden departure left Lindsay feeling both upset and scared. Lindsay was all too familiar with the physical and financial strains of motherhood. Her family, the Wilsons, were loving and close-knit, but they had often struggled to make ends meet. Despite their financial challenges, Lindsay's parents had always worked hard to provide for their children. When Lindsay met Mitchell, 5 months into her pregnancy, she felt like she had been given a rare gift. Mitchell, who was 20 years old at the time, was attentive, caring, and gentle. What impressed Lindsay most was that her pregnancy didn't deter him. Instead, he was eager to be involved and supportive. Mitchell told Lindsay that he had fallen in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, raising her child as his own. To show his commitment, Mitchell began working overtime to ensure that Lindsay and their unborn child would not have to worry about anything. 20-year-old Mitchell was a true gentleman. He was attentive and loving to Lindsay, despite her delicate condition. In fact, Mitchell had fallen deeply in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, including raising her child as his own. At the time, Mitchell was earning a good income. However, when they announced their decision to get married, their parents were shocked. They felt that their 5-week relationship was too short to withstand the challenges and circumstances that came with marriage. Despite their concerns, Lindsay's relatives noticed a positive change in her since being with Mitchell. She had regained her cheerfulness and good health. However, some of them found Mitchell's behavior to be a bit insincere. Nevertheless, no one interfered with their decision to get married, and instead chose to keep their doubts to themselves. The wedding took place in August 1995, surrounded by a small, intimate group of family and friends, mostly from the bride's side. The groom's side was noticeably underrepresented, with only his parents, a brother, and 2 friends in attendance. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Lindsay's relatives couldn't shake off their uneasy feelings about the union. However, Lindsay herself was over the moon, believing she had found her perfect match. As the evening wore on, their happiness was short-lived. A disagreement erupted, and the newlyweds' argument played out in front of their guests. The reason for Mitchell's outburst seemed trivial, and his reaction was disproportionately intense. The situation escalated, with Mitchell grasping Lindsay's hand and violently shaking her, leaving everyone in attendance stunned and uncomfortable. Mitchell appeared agitated and threatening, causing concern. When he calmed down, he apologized to everyone and made light of the situation, attributing his behavior to holiday stress. Although Lindsay didn't think much of the incident at the time and soon forgot about it, it was actually one of the warning signs of their toxic relationship. After getting married, Mitchell and Lindsay moved into an apartment in Southport, away from their parents. They started their life together and soon welcomed a baby girl named Robin. However, Lindsay soon discovered that her husband had a volatile temper, which cast a shadow over the joy of their new family. Mitchell's moods were unpredictable. One moment he was happy and joking, and the next, he would become aggressive and unreasonable. She thought she was maintaining a delicate balance at home, but in reality, she was giving in to his control. He dictates her every move and gets angry if she misses a phone call or doesn't pick up. Their arguments often ended with Mitchell begging for forgiveness and declaring his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had been restored, but their cycle of arguments became more and more intense. Lindsay struggled to recognize who she once loved. She frequently shared her concerns with her relatives, who urged her to leave the relationship and end her suffering. However, Lindsay found it difficult to acknowledge her mistake and admit defeat. Lindsay's relatives noticed that she often dwelled on memories of the past. Whenever her husband promised to change and return to his gentle and caring ways, Lindsay wanted to believe him and waited for him to fulfill his promises. Meanwhile, Mitchell's controlling behavior intensified. He restricted Lindsay's freedom, forbidding her from going out alone in the evenings and eventually requiring her to be accompanied by him at all times. Despite his possessiveness, Mitchell was seen with other women, sparking Lindsay's suspicions of infidelity. Lindsay confided in her older sister about her concerns, sharing an incident where a woman visited their home, unaware that Mitchell was married. This revelation led to another argument, which escalated into physical violence. Physical abuse gradually became a part of Lindsay's life. To control her and protect his reputation, Mitchell started limiting her interactions with others. He began by restricting her contact with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and eventually with her family. Lindsay, unhappy and fearful of being caught and punished, tried to secretly maintain contact with her loved ones. Despite the problems in their relationship, Lindsay stayed with Mitchell. One reason was the comfortable life he provided. He had a good income, supported her and their child, and paid the bills, leaving her without any financial worries. Lindsay's life changed dramatically when she found herself pregnant again. Although her husband, Mitchell, was a good father to her daughter from a previous relationship, she felt that having another child would be unwise in their current circumstances. She decided to have an abortion. When Mitchell found out about her decision, he became furious and verbally and physically abused her. Lindsay packed her belongings and took her daughter to her parents' home. Her family was relieved to see her. At first, Lindsay was happy to be apart from her husband, Mitchell. But over time, she started to miss him. Mitchell, eager to win her back, would call her constantly, begging her to return. Despite initial reservations, Lindsay was eventually won over by Mitchell's claims that he had changed. Everything seems to be back to normal, they are even looking forward to another child. However, their happiness was short-lived. After 6 months, Mitchell's violent temper flared up again. Although he didn't harm Lindsay, who was pregnant at the time, he unleashed his fury on their apartment. He smashed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and damaged the walls. He even threw their television out the window and vandalized their car. The landlord, fed up with the destruction, demanded that they pay for the damages and move out. The family's financial situation became even more dire. As a result, they was forced to take out a significant loan and downsize to a smaller, more modest apartment. In October 1997, Lindsay gave birth to their son, Jack. Mitchell was overjoyed at the arrival of his child. However, the relationship between the spouses continued to deteriorate over time. Mitchell often left home for extended periods, sometimes for just a few days, sometimes for an entire week, frequently citing trivial or made-up reasons. Although Lindsay had grown accustomed to her husband's behavior, she eventually reached her breaking point and filed for divorce, returning to her parents' home when Mitchell abandoned her once again. Lindsay realized she couldn't handle the separation from Mitchell on her own, so she reached out to a local charity that supports women in crisis. The charity helped her find affordable housing in a different city, allowing her to start fresh. However, she was worried that Mitchell would find out her new contact information, so she took steps to protect herself. When Mitchell began making threats, she took it a step further and got a restraining order from the police. With the help of a therapist, Lindsay started rebuilding her life. She kept a journal to document her experiences, intending to use it as a warning for her children in the future, so they wouldn't make the same mistakes she did. The journal entries supported what her relatives had said about the problems within the family. Unfortunately, despite her efforts to stay hidden, Mitchell eventually discovered her phone number and began calling her constantly, demanding to see their son. Lindsay, now free, soon felt lonely and couldn't resist her ex's persistence. They started talking and seeing each other again, eventually moving back in together. Ashamed of her weakness, Lindsay kept this a secret, but it eventually came out. Her relatives and friends were shocked and disappointed by her reunion with who they considered a tyrant, and they couldn't understand why she had taken him back. Her relatives continued to dislike Mitchell and cut off most communication with him. Despite their efforts to help her, Lindsay repeatedly returned to the abusive relationship. As a result, her loved ones eventually gave up trying to save her, accepting the situation and distancing themselves. This time, however, Lindsay's decision would prove to have devastating consequences. After Lindsay disclosed her situation, a social worker began monitoring the young family. However, the social worker reported that she had been unable to contact Lindsay for several weeks. Every time she visited the home, Lindsay's husband, Mitchell, would answer the door, and he was also the first to answer any phone calls. Despite the social worker's repeated requests to speak directly with Lindsay, Mitchell would make excuses and prevent her from doing so. The social worker would leave her contact information, but Lindsay never returned her calls. The social worker became concerned for Lindsay's safety and requested a welfare check. When law enforcement responded to the report and visited the address, they too were unable to speak with Lindsay. Mitchell claimed that he had not seen his wife at home for a long time, but he did not consider her missing. Mitchell said that Lindsay participated in a party with a friend on Christmas Eve, returning home early in the morning somewhat intoxicated. This led to an argument with Mitchell. Following the argument, Lindsay packed her belongings and left without saying goodbye to the children. Mitchell claimed Lindsay had left him for another man and no longer wanted to have any contact with him. Mitchell's subsequent media appearances sparked widespread attention. He presented himself as a worried and abandoned husband, pleading for Lindsay to return. However, during these interviews, he also shared intimate details about their marriage, occasionally speaking negatively about his wife. Mitchell believes that Lindsay's actions stemmed from a desire for a lavish lifestyle. He said to have seen her driving an expensive car, which he thought was proof that she had left their children for a wealthy man. Despite her public image, Mitchell was enjoying the freedom of a single life. The search for Lindsay began with conversations with her relatives. During these conversations, it was learned that she was last seen by her family on December 11th. At that time, she appeared to be in high spirits and looking well, with her behavior being normal. During their investigation, detectives were surprised that no one had expressed concern about the young wife's whereabouts for 2 months. However, they soon discovered a plausible explanation. Mitchell had a history of limiting his wife's interactions with others, even close relatives. In the past, her family had difficulty staying in touch with her due to Mitchell's controlling behavior, which made it more believable that Lindsay had intentionally kept a low profile for an extended period. The news of Lindsay's disappearance alarmed everyone, despite the initial assumption that she was not the type to be concerned about. She was known for her modest lifestyle and never drank. Additionally, her husband had restricted her from having any contact with the outside world, including friends and acquaintances. Several inconsistencies in Mitchell's statement to the police raised suspicions about his character. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would willingly let his wife leave, and that Lindsay would not abandon her children to a controlling husband. To clarify the situation, the police conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing all of Lindsay's acquaintances and searching for anyone who may have seen her after the family gathering. They also questioned their neighbors and obtained surveillance footage from the residential complex and surrounding areas. Lindsay's disappearance was not immediately noticed, and by the time it was. However, investigators later discovered that she was last seen in person on December 15 at the local post office, where she sent several letters and postcards. Her older sister confirmed that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. During their brief conversation over tea, Lindsay handed her sister a note and asked her to read it later. Unfortunately, the sister forgot about the note in her purse and was unable to find it later, leaving its contents a mystery. As the months passed, investigators grew increasingly suspicious that she was no longer alive, given her prolonged absence and lack of contact. Although they couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient evidence, their suspicions about him intensified as they learned more about their history and relationship. Lindsay's parents and detectives suspected Mitchell was involved in her disappearance, but lacked concrete evidence. Searches at their home and nearby turned up nothing. In a televised interview, Mitchell denied any wrongdoing, even claiming Lindsay's family would eventually apologize for suspecting him. Just before the holidays, Mitchell sent a postcard and hair dye to the lead investigator. The postcard's sarcastic message mocked the detective, implying he needed confidence and to cover his gray hair. This gesture showcased Mitchell's arrogance, despite portraying himself as a victim in the media. The investigation team held an interview to clarify some aspects of the case, but they didn't reveal all the details. They suggested that Mitchell Key, a well-known family man, was not what he seemed to be. In 2000, Mitchell Key found himself at the center of a scandal when it was discovered that he had been forging his wife's signature to claim social benefits. Although this revelation indirectly supported the theory that he was involved in Lindsay's disappearance, the investigators had trouble making progress due to Mitchell's popularity. Many people defended him, arguing that as a single father, he needed financial assistance. Despite this, the detectives were able to charge him with fraud. Mitchell was found guilty and sentenced to a month of community service. Mitchell's situation took a turn for the worse. The forged signature of his missing wife raised more than a few eyebrows, and the public's outrage grew. As the criticism mounted, Mitchell's composure began to fray, and he lashed out at the media for invading his personal life. In a groundbreaking development, a visitor to an amusement park on June 1, 2000, stumbled upon a disturbing discovery that rekindled the Lindsay disappearance case. Their dog's strange behavior near the roller coaster led to the discovery of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Lindsay, revealing she had been the victim of a violent crime. This breakthrough shifted the investigation's focus to finding the person responsible. On June 7, Mitchell was questioned by detectives for over 36 hours, during which time he eventually cracked under the pressure and confessed to murdering and dismembering his wife. According to his testimony, Lindsay had asked for a divorce on December 15, 1998, after meeting with her sister. This request enraged Mitchell, causing him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her body in their bedroom, taking steps to conceal the smell. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, Mitchell turned to his brother Elliot, a butcher, for assistance. Although Elliot was initially hesitant, Mitchell eventually convinced him to help. While their children played in the next room, the brothers dismembered Lindsay's body and later scattered her remains throughout the city. The murderer showed no remorse or empathy during his confession. Instead, he seemed to take pride in his actions, saying that without his confession, they would never have been able to prove his guilt. He then led the authorities to the locations where he had hidden the victim's body parts. Unfortunately, her head and one hand were never found. The forensic examination confirmed that all of those of Lindsay, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Mitchell brothers took place in January 2001 and was a relatively straightforward process. Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist observed that Mitchell displayed classic characteristics of a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. Elliot, Mitchell's brother, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in covering up the crime. Lindsay's children were taken care of by her grandparents, who gave them their last name. 3 months after the sentence, the Wilson family faced another tragedy when one of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the loss, took his own life in the family's attic. In his goodbye note, he expressed his desire to reunite with Lindsay, saying he saw no point in living in a world he considered cruel. As of 2017, Mitchell Key, Lindsay's murderer, became eligible for parole, but as of January 2023, his parole requests have been denied 3 times. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Walsh. Anna Luic, later known as Anna O'Neill, was born on April 18, 1983 in Belgrade, Serbia. She grew up in a cultured family with her younger sister. At the 5th Belgrade Gymnasium, Anna excelled as a standout student. She then attended Belgrade Research University, the most historic and expansive university in Serbia. Anna pursued foreign languages, earning a master's degree in French language and literature at 22. With her diploma, Anna sought a new chapter in the United States, fully supported by her family. In 2005, she settled in the US, aiming to further her education in hospitality management. She took administrative roles at prestigious hotels, including the Inn at Little Washington in Virginia. Anna's warm approach, sense of duty, and conflict resolution skills quickly earned her respect from peers and supervisors. Multilingual and charming, she formed connections easily. Beloved by colleagues and friends, Anna seized every chance to shine. She became a US citizen, retaining her Serbian nationality, and enjoyed a high income, investing in property and a car. Her travels further broadened her horizons, and her career flourished, leading to a promotion to senior manager. Anna's captivating qualities, including her intelligence, beauty, slender physique, and radiant smile, drew in numerous admirers. While working at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts, she met and fell in love with Marcus O'Neill, the hotel's head chef. Their romance ultimately led to their marriage in 2009, at which point Anna took her husband's last name. Born in July 1975 in Boston, Massachusetts, Brian Paul Walsh came from a prominent, wealthy, and respected family. As a young man, he would frequently borrow money from friends, only to fail to repay them. During his college years, he would invite friends to dine at upscale restaurants, then use various tactics to manipulate others into covering his share of the bill. Brian was estranged from his father, Dr. Thomas Walsh, for many years until the elder's death in 2018. The estrangement dated back to when Brian fraudulently withdrew nearly $1 million from his father's personal account and disappeared with the money. Despite this, Dr. Walsh chose not to report the incident to the police and instead tried to persuade Brian to return the money voluntarily. However, when Brian refused, Dr. Walsh cut off all communication with him. By the time of the theft, Brian's parents had already divorced, and his father had started a new family. In response to Brian's actions, Dr. Walsh decided to remove him from his life and will. After Dr. Walsh's passing, Brian reappeared and filed a lawsuit claiming that the will was forged by the doctor's widow and younger children to deny him his rightful inheritance. However, Brian was unable to prove his claims and received no part of the estate. Those who knew Brian described him as greedy, malevolent, and cruel. with a tendency towards violence and a lack of emotional control. He often relied on force to achieve his goals and became dangerous during bouts of anger. In the late 2000s, Brian received treatment in a psychiatric clinic to address his rage issues, during which he was officially diagnosed with sociopathy. Brian and Anna first met in 2014 when Anna was working as a senior reservation manager at the Wheatle Hotel in Massachusetts. At the time, she was married to Marcus O'Neill, who was also employed at the hotel. Brian, who was a guest at the hotel, was immediately drawn to Anna's charm. Despite knowing she was already married, Brian continued to show her increasing attention, which eventually became insistent. Used to getting his way, Brian persisted in pursuing Anna, even after she rejected him. He managed to get her phone number and home address, where she lived with her husband, and began to harass them relentlessly. In 2015, the Anna were forced to seek police protection from Brian's constant harassment, which continued day and night. Brian would show up at Anna's workplace, call her at home, and send her messages, demanding she leave her husband for him. The situation took a dark turn when Brian threatened to harm Anna and her husband if she didn't comply with his demands. What triggered Anna's change of heart remains unclear, but a year after seeking police protection, she unexpectedly divorced her husband. Months later, Brian became her second husband. They settled into a luxurious home in Quinton, Massachusetts, an upscale neighborhood about 20 miles southeast of Boston. They had 3 sons in quick succession, with the boys being 2, 4, and 6 years old at the time of Anna's disappearance. Despite having a demanding job, Anna successfully balanced her career with motherhood, never taking maternity leave. She became the regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, a real estate company, earning a high salary and becoming the primary breadwinner for the family. Due to her frequent business trips to Washington, D.C., she also bought a second home in her name, where she stayed during these trips. To help take care of their children during her absences, Anna relied on visiting nannies. Meanwhile, Brian was unemployed while his wife was building their family and advancing her career. He had spent most of the $1 million he had taken from his father, and all of Anna's acquisitions were registered in her name. As a result, Brian was actively searching for ways to generate effortless income. Before marrying Anna, Brian had formed a connection with a wealthy individual in South Korea, whose family possessed an impressive art collection. After returning to the US, Brian maintained this connection and was unexpectedly asked by his friend to assist in selling several Andy Warhol paintings. Instead of just earning a commission, Brian decided to profit from the transaction. He gained access to a series of abstract Warhol paintings titled Shadow and appraised each one, obtaining authenticity certificates. Then, he created copies of both the paintings and documents. Brian found artists who could create precise replicas, convincing them he needed backups, since each original was worth around $250,000. For several years, he successfully sold fake paintings as originals to collectors worldwide. However, one buyer, an expert in Andy Warhol's work, quickly identified a forgery and sued Brian. The FBI investigated, and in April 2021, Brian pleaded guilty to selling counterfeit art. He was placed under house arrest after his lawyer negotiated a deal, requiring him to return the proceeds to the buyers and avoid prison time. Brian was under house arrest, but he was allowed to leave his house twice a day for specific activities. He could drive his children to and from school, and had a 2.5-hour window in the morning to visit a limited list of approved places in his neighborhood, such as stores, pharmacies, and dry cleaners, to buy essential items. On December 31st, 2022, Mrs. Anna Walsh mysteriously disappeared. The Walsh family had planned to celebrate New Year's Eve together at home, just the 5 of them, Anna, Brian, and their 3 young sons. After the boys went to bed early, Anna and Brian stayed at the dinner table. That evening, Anna posted a message on social media, wishing everyone a happy new year, and hinting that the past year had been tough, but she and Brian were still together. Anna was scheduled to fly to Washington, D.C. for work on January 3rd, but when she failed to show up, her employer Tishman Speyer reported her missing to the police on January 4th. Brian also reported her missing, worried that he hadn't been able to contact her for days. According to Brian, he last saw Anna on January 1st when she woke him up early in the morning, claiming she had to go to work due to some issues and her boss had asked her to come in earlier than planned. He believed she then headed to the airport with only a few belongings. However, several inconsistencies in the case soon arose. For instance, Anna had not bought, changed, or reserved a flight ticket for January 1st, and she had not canceled her scheduled flight for January 3rd. Additionally, she was not seen at the airport on either January 1st or 3rd. Furthermore, it was unclear how she left the house since her personal car was still in the garage and she had not called a taxi. Brian's suggestion that she might have hitchhiked was not convincing. Brian's statements and behavior sparked numerous questions. His explanations were contradictory, and he didn't appear particularly concerned about the unfolding events. Despite being unable to contact the mother of his children for over 3 days, he only reported her missing on the 4th day, and only after her workplace called. From the start, Mr. Walsh was considered a prime suspect, yet law enforcement didn't have enough evidence to arrest him or obtain a warrant to search their family home. They conducted a limited inspection with the homeowner's permission, but it didn't yield any results. Brian claimed to have led a normal life during those 3 days, visiting usual stores and doing household chores. However, verifying his claims was challenging, as he often left the house without his phone, which he alleged was frequently taken by his older children to play games without his permission. On January 5th, the police issued a public appeal on TV, showing a photo of Anna and asking anyone who knew her whereabouts or what had happened to her to contact the authorities immediately. However, no one came forward with any information. The last time Anna had been in touch with anyone was on December 31st, when she made phone calls to her mother and sister. Her husband was the last person known to have seen her. Surveillance cameras in the neighborhood did not capture any footage of Anna on the morning of January 1st, making it seem as though she had never left her home. In contrast, her husband was recorded leaving and returning to their home several times, but it was impossible to determine where he had gone. His claim of visiting a supermarket was proven to be false, as his vehicle was not seen on any routes to the store, and he was not spotted inside. It wasn't until January 8th that Brian was arrested for making false statements and was taken in for questioning at the police station. His home was finally searched, and it was discovered that on January 1st, he had visited a hardware store in a different area, which was not on the list of approved locations he was allowed to visit while under house arrest. At the hardware store, Brian spent nearly $500 on a large quantity of cleaning supplies, including plastic sheeting, duct tape, a mop and bucket, and utility rags. He paid in cash, likely hoping to keep his visit secret. During a search of the Walsh family home, disturbing discoveries were made. Although the house appeared normal at first, with no signs of struggle or bloodstains, the basement told a different story. Law enforcement officers found smeared bloodstains everywhere, along with a bloodied knife and saw wrapped in towels, hidden among the clutter. Brian had previously admitted to visiting his mother's home on January 3rd, claiming he needed to help her with household tasks due to her poor health. However, after the grim discoveries in the basement, police suspected that Walsh may have disposed of evidence or parts of his deceased wife's body on his way there. They inspected trash bins in the area where the couple lived, as well as along the road to his mother's house, and found a kitchen hatchet with dried blood and several blood-stained towels, similar to those found in the Walsh basement. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood in the basement on the towels, knife, hatchet, and saw belonged to Anna, confirming her death. The seized laptop and tablet revealed a disturbing search history. Weeks prior to his wife's disappearance, Brian had been actively searching online for information on the most favorable states for divorce in terms of property division. He also looked into whether he could claim the second home in Washington, D.C., which was owned by Anna and registered solely in her name, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. One of the earliest searches, made around 4 a.m. on January 1st, was about how long it takes for a body to decompose. This was followed by nearly 24 searches on how to dispose of a body, including how to clean up blood traces, how to dismember a body, and whether a body could be identified if the teeth were removed. He also searched for information on how long DNA traces last and whether a person could be charged with a crime if the body was never found. All of these searches were conducted on his young child's tablet. By January 3rd, Brian's searches had shifted to inheritance, as he looked into how and when someone can inherit the property of a person who has disappeared. This suggests that he was confident he would avoid punishment and was preparing to claim the inheritance. On January 18th, Brian was officially accused of murdering his wife, even though her body or remains had not been discovered. Prosecutors allege that on New Year's Day, Brian intentionally or accidentally killed his wife, then decided to get rid of her body by dismembering it in their home's basement. He allegedly put the body parts in plastic bags and threw them away in trash cans located in different areas of the city. The area surrounding the Walsh home, as well as nearby empty lands, wooded areas, and bodies of water, were extensively searched for evidence, but nothing was found. The defendant, Brian Walsh, has pleaded not guilty and is refusing to reveal what happened to Anna's body. Recently, Anna had been unhappy and was considering divorcing her husband, which she mentioned several times during phone calls with her mother and sister the day before she vanished. However, her mother did not take Anna's threats seriously and decided to put off her visit. The trial is ongoing, and Brian is being held at the Norfolk Correctional Facility as he awaits his next court date. Anna's mother is following the investigation from her home in Serbia and has not traveled to the United States. The Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has contacted the New York consulate, which is in touch with the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, to ensure Anna's mother is kept informed about the investigation and hearings. Brian and Anna's 3 sons are now in state custody because none of Brian's family members are willing to care for them. They cite Anna's mother's age and poor health, and her sister, who lives in Canada, has also declined to take in her nephews. The only person willing to take the boys in is Pamela Bond, a close friend of Anna's, who prefers this to them being separated and placed in different foster homes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Her family and early life are not well documented. She spent her childhood in an area called Cuba, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samadi attended a local school, where she demonstrated a challenging and conflicted personality from an early age. She had difficulty accepting rejection and often used force or deception to get what she wanted. People who knew her recall that Samadi's striking appearance and perfect figure made it easy for her to charm men, but she struggled to maintain relationships. Her beauty and charisma were matched by her greed and vanity, which led her to prioritize material wealth and self-interest above all else. This attitude often discouraged potential partners. Additionally, Samadi became intensely jealous and aggressive after brief relationships. Samadi's doll-like appearance led to her working as a Barbie lookalike at a large Universal bookstore for several years. This earned her a flattering nickname that stuck with her throughout her life. After high school, Samadi had in love with a successful local TV journalist named Osvaldo Fernando Ballery, who was 16 years her senior. Samadi had a long and serious relationship with Osvaldo, with whom she had 2 children, Christopher and Christina. However, Due to constant scandals and jealousy, they separated in 2012. After Oswaldo's sudden death, it was discovered that he had not included Samadi in his will. Samadi took matters into her own hands and seized Oswaldo's house, changing the locks to prevent his relatives and heirs from entering. She also took some valuable items that belonged to Oswaldo. His family members were outraged and went to court to accuse Samadi of theft. The police eventually forced Samadi to leave the house, but she was not charged with a crime. Samadi had other relationships, including one with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a daughter named Maria. This relationship was reportedly official, but ended in divorce after a few years. Samadi allegedly gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent, contradicting claims that she was unmarried at the time. Interestingly, some of her lovers have mysteriously disappeared or died under unclear circumstances, yet this trend went unnoticed for a long time. For instance, one of Samadi's lovers went missing shortly after deciding to end their relationship with the reportedly temperamental and aggressive woman. Despite relative suspicions of her involvement, his disappearance remains unsolved due to lack of concrete evidence. Another former lover, Diaco, met a tragic end after breaking up with Samadi. His murder was initially attributed to a botched robbery, but the perpetrators were never caught. Speculations about Samadi's role in the crime persisted, albeit without solid proof. Her most notable alleged victim was Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native born in December 1992 in San Jose. Gerardo never knew his biological father, who left the family before his birth. His mother, Ana Patricia, later married Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted and raised Gerardo as his own. Gerardo's younger sister, Milena, was born a few years after him. He had a peaceful and carefree childhood and youth. Gerardo attended a regular school, enjoyed motorcycles, and met his true love, Carol, at a young age. By 23, he, Carol, and their 4-year-old daughter Genesis moved into his aunt and uncle's house in San Sebastian, a suburb of the city. Gerardo took a job at a local bakery to support his family. They were happy, especially with the news of a second child on the way. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, a 40-year-old woman who regularly visited the bakery. She was attractive, fashionably dressed, and flirtatious. As Samadi aged, she began to have relationships with younger men, likely flattered by their attention. Despite their nearly 20-year age difference, Gerardo became infatuated with Samadi and started secretly meeting with her. She visited the bakery almost daily, catching the attention of other employees. Samadi often brought her 19-year-old daughter, Christina, to the bakery. Initially, Gerardo balanced his family life and secret meetings with Samadi without either woman knowing about the other. However, Gerardo soon let his guard down, boasting to friends and colleagues about his relationship with Samadi, describing her as a terrific mistress who spoiled him with gifts. Rumors about Gerardo's affair soon reached his mother, who attempted to persuade him to end the relationship. The affair was short-lived, ending in October 2015, when Samadi discovered that his mistress, Gerardo, was married with a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Upon learning this, Samadi became enraged. She began harassing Carol, Gerardo's wife, with threatening calls and messages, warning her that Gerardo would be harmed if he didn't return to her exclusively. Gerardo apologized to his wife and reconciled, keeping their family intact. He underestimated Samadi's malice, thinking she would move on and calm down after the breakup. However, Samadi's vindictiveness was more intense than Gerardo anticipated. Shortly after the breakup, Gerardo witnessed a disturbing incident. While walking downtown, Gerardo noticed an older man secretly filming under a young girl's mini-skirt with his phone. Outraged, Gerardo took out his phone to record the scene. He then approached she, told her what was happening, and advised her to report the incident to the police. Gerardo chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to get a clear shot of his face on camera. During the chase, Gerardo asked loudly if the man was enjoying taking photos of his sister's underwear without their consent. The man eventually jumped into a taxi and escaped. That night, Gerardo posted the video on his social media page, and it quickly went viral. Internet users identified the man as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former Ministry of Finance employee. As a result, Gerardo became a national celebrity, giving daily interviews to newspapers and appearing on TV and radio shows. He condemned Delgado's actions and stated that he had no regrets about exposing him. However, Delgado's lawyers began working against Gerardo, accusing him of violating the law by distributing the video. They prepared a lawsuit against him, which left Gerardo surprised and confused. He couldn't understand why he was being judged for exposing his actions, rather than the man being held accountable for his behavior. Gerardo's last interview was on October 7th at a local radio station. Feeling confident and believing he had nothing to hide, he spoke openly. The following day, Gerardo had plans to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he suddenly canceled, citing an unexpected emergency. It was later revealed that he had received a message from Samadi, luring him to the park that evening under the pretext of another interview. Gerardo had no reason to suspect anything was amiss and trusted his former lover. After finishing work, he went to the agreed meeting point, but instead of journalists, two unknown men were waiting. They took his bag, assaulted him, stabbed him multiple times in the chest and stomach, and then fled. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo managed to call a friend and report the incident. The friend immediately alerted the police and medical services. Thanks to the swift response, Gerardo was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save his life for 42 days. He underwent numerous operations, but unfortunately, they were unable to save him. Gerardo passed away on November 19th in the intensive care unit. Initially, multiple theories emerged about the crime. The first theory suggested it was a robbery murder. Gerardo was indeed attacked in a park at night, his bag was stolen, and he was stabbed with a knife, which made it appear to be a typical theft. However, just a few days before, Gerardo had released a sensational video that compromised a well-known former government official, leading to a second theory, that the murder was an act of revenge. The media openly speculated that the former government official may have hired hitmen to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The murder sparked intense debate in the press, with protesters demanding that the perpetrators be caught and brought to justice. The police explored various theories, searching for other potential enemies of Gerardo. For months, the investigation stalled. However, in May 2016, a breakthrough came when footage from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The video showed two men fleeing the scene where Gerardo was fatally attacked. These individuals immediately became the prime suspects, and the police worked to identify and apprehend them. The footage proved to be crucial evidence, and once it was made public, the case started to move forward. It was repeatedly shown on news programs, with viewers asked to take a close look as the individuals could be dangerous. Police created rough sketches of the suspects and described their physical characteristics. One of the suspects soon came forward, hoping that cooperating with the investigation would lead to a reduced sentence. The information provided by the cooperating suspect led investigators to several accomplices and the crime's organizers, Samadi and her daughter Christina. All individuals involved in the crime were eventually taken into custody. Those arrested included Ronald Archie, a cab driver who helped locate the perpetrators, Cesar Chavez, a laborer who acted as an intermediary, and Omar Costa, a young miner who directly participated in the attack and had been tracking the victim on the day of the incident. The investigation revealed the roles and connections of all parties involved through phone records and text messages. Samadi, who had meticulously planned the crime, had enlisted the help of her daughter Christina. Together, They recruited friends Ronald and Caesar to find hitmen to kill Gerardo, staging it to look like a botched robbery in a nighttime park. They were later joined by Omar, who was responsible for ensuring the victim went to the prearranged location. Samadi personally chose October 7th as the date for the massacre. On that day, she was in frequent contact with all parties involved, assigning roles and verifying that everyone adhered to the plan. Gerardo was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and robbed of his bag and jacket. These stolen items were later given to the police as evidence. The primary evidence against Samadi was a series of text messages detailing the murder plan and each participant's role. Samadi was so confident she wouldn't get caught that she didn't bother deleting the incriminating messages. Her motive for the crime was jealousy. She didn't want to share her lover with his wife. If she couldn't have him, no one would. She carefully planned the crime, involving her own daughter, who assisted her throughout. Samadi and her daughter were immediately arrested, with no possibility of bail due to the risk of them fleeing the country. Their accomplices were also detained, except for Omar, the youngest participant, who was handed over to juvenile authorities. The investigation spanned a year and a half, concluding in December 2017 when the trial of all parties involved in the criminal conspiracy commenced. It was revealed that Samadi had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior arrest for forging documents to obtain state benefits, for which she received only a fine. New information also emerged about Miguel Angel Perez, ex-husband of Samadi. It was discovered that Samadi had given their child Perez's surname without his consent. She then successfully petitioned the court to order him to pay child support, which he did for over 3 years. However, it was later uncovered that the entire process had been fraudulent. As a result, Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a substantial fine. During the trial, Gerardo's wife testified that she had been aware of his affair with Samadi. She stated that Samadi had threatened Gerardo with death, but he had not taken these threats seriously. The primary motive behind the crime, as previously stated, was Samadi's jealousy and wounded pride, stemming from her inability to accept that her younger lover had chosen to remain with his wife. Thanks to phone records, it was discovered that the mother and daughter had planned the crime together. Additionally, after the release of the CCTV footage showing the killers, Christine had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was close to going to the police to confess. However, her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would not lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadi was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while Christina, Ronald, and Caesar each received 25-year prison sentences. One of the killers was sent to a juvenile detention center, and the other had not been found at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family was awarded $140,000 in compensation for their loss. After the verdict, the family expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment of Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that Samadi and Christina's lawyers had filed an appeal to reduce their sentences. As a result, each participant's sentence was reduced by 5 years. Samadi is currently serving her 25-year sentence in a Costa Rican women's prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kaylee Mandotti. Kaylee Mandotti was born on August 20, 1998, in Webster, Texas, to parents Tack Mandotti and Allison Steele. Her family enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with her mother working as a scientist and her father serving as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. Following her parents' divorce, Kaylee's mother, Allison, married NASA engineer Lawrence Buten, who resided in Houston. Although Kaylee's parents were separated, she maintained a close relationship with her father and regularly stayed in touch. Her stepfather, Lawrence, adored Kaylee and became a loving second father figure to her. Kaylee was an exceptional individual, cherished by her family and friends. She excelled as a student, team member, sister, and companion, spreading joy with her infectious laughter and kind heart. Throughout her academic career, Kaylee consistently demonstrated academic excellence and actively participated in extracurricular activities. Her diverse interests included horseback riding, piano playing, and theatrical performances. As a Girl Scout, Kaylee spent time exploring the Clear Lake neighborhood with friends and embarking on hikes with her parents. Upon graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee continued to pursue her passions. With a deep love for animals, Kaylee volunteered with a group called Animal Therapy. Her adventurous spirit drove her to seek out new experiences, and she aspired to try extreme sports and explore uncharted territories, always seeking thrilling experiences that brought her joy. At 19, Kaylee was a sophomore at Trinity University in San Antonio, studying communications. She was popular, with many friends, and led the cheerleading squad for the football team. Her beauty and charisma drew many admirers. During a football game, she met 22-year-old Mark Howerton, a tall, athletic professional baseball player. Initially, Kaylee didn't notice Mark, as she was interested in someone else, Jet. However, Mark was immediately smitten with Kaylee, captivated by her large black eyes and charm. Mark and Kaylee started dating in September 2017, despite their first 2 meetings not going well. Friends thought they were mismatched, as both were emotional and quick-tempered. Their relationship was marked by intense arguments and jealousy. Kaylee often had bruises and was afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark, a disturbing sign of the toxic relationship. The situation gets worse when Mark became aggressive, pulled out a gun, and threatened violence. Kaylee knew about her boyfriend's jealous nature and temper, but she would reassure her friends and ask them not to discuss their loud arguments publicly. However, on September 24, 2017, around 1 a.m., Kaylee's roommates had had enough and called the police due to loud noises and a man yelling and threatening violence coming from Kaylee's room. When the officer arrived, Mark was alone in the room, and Kaylee declined to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Kaylee's friends suspected Mark of using controlled substances, which led to his angry outbursts. They recalled an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony and reported it to the police. Despite their tumultuous relationship, they was deeply in love during calm moments. On October 29th, they attended the Mala Luna Music Festival in San Antonio, a major event with gothic and industrial music. Mark and Kaylee were enjoying a fun time with their friends at a festival until Kaylee's ex-partner unexpectedly appeared, causing tension between Mark and Kaylee. They got into a big argument and left the festival early. Their friends didn't see them again that night. 6 hours later, Mark pulled up to a hospital in his black Mercedes, frantically seeking help. The medical staff found Kaylee unconscious and partially undressed in the front seat. The car was a mess, with her clothes scattered everywhere, and she was slumped forward, unresponsive. The hospital staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room, where Mark revealed that they had taken illegal substances before the festival. This information helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. Kaylee was then transferred to a specialized medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse with expertise in intimate assault cases examined her. The nurse found additional bruises on Kaylee's arms, legs, and ear. Further examination revealed that Kaylee had suffered blunt force trauma to the face and head, which ultimately led to her death. It became clear that Kaylee had been Kaylee of a fatal assault. Police launched an investigation into the death of Kaylee Mendotti, focusing on Mark as the primary suspect since he was the last person seen with her on the night of her death. During police interviews, Mark raised suspicions by repeatedly changing his story and omitting crucial details. Surveillance footage revealed that he and Kaylee had been to places that Mark had not mentioned in his account. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Mark had a history of aggressive behavior towards Kaylee, according to her friends and family. One of her sisters even expressed fear of him. The police uncovered previous incidents of violence between they, including an instance where Mark hit Kaylee's head against a car window and vandalized her dorm room at Trinity University. When Kaylee's parents learned about Mark's history of abuse, they were devastated. Her mother, Allison Steele, filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging that the school failed to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also named Mark as a defendant, claiming that he killed Kaylee in a jealous rage. The lawsuit claims that Mark Howerton assaulted 19-year-old Kaylee Mandotti, resulting in her death. It also alleges that Trinity University staff, administrators, and campus police were aware of Howerton's violent behavior and threats to harm Kaylee, including physical harm and breaking her face. Despite this knowledge, the university failed to take action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit, citing the ongoing legal process. The lawsuit states that the university's inaction, despite numerous reports of harassment, intimidation, domestic violence, and gender discrimination, led to Kaylee's tragic death. The lawsuit argues that if Trinity University had intervened as it should have, Kaylee's death could have been prevented. The university failed to follow its own policy on investigating and responding to potential cases of relationship violence and harassment. After an incident in his dorm room, Mark was banned from campus for a year due to a criminal trespass order. Despite this, he continued to violate the order. Furthermore, detectives uncovered numerous accounts of Mark's violent behavior towards Kaylee during their relationship. One of Kaylee's sisters reported that Mark threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony during an argument. Another sister claimed that Mark threatened to shoot some of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend's brothers with a gun. Based on these allegations, the police issued a warrant for Mark's arrest in February 2018. He turned himself in to the authorities. Following the discovery of Kaylee's disarrayed room at the university, Mark faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction. However, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. The first trial regarding Kaylee's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark, known for his volatile temperament, fatally assaulted Kaylee in a fit of rage. They claimed that he drove her around for nearly 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. In his defense, Mark's lawyers suggested that Kaylee's death could be attributed to various factors, including the presence of banned substances in her system, which may have caused a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described the injuries on her daughter's body as severe, comparable to those from a plane crash. The injuries were indeed extensive, as evident from photos shown to the Bayhart County jurors. The images depict Kaylee, a sophomore at Trinity University from San Antonio, Texas, with severe bruises, red marks and scratches all over her body, from head to toe. Both her eyelids were swollen and bruised. Only her back and the back of her legs showed no signs of injury. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who conducted Kaylee Mandotti's autopsy, took graphics and photographs that revealed a subdural hematoma on the right side of Kaylee's brain. This type of injury is typically associated with traumatic brain damage. Kaylee's father, Tilak Kaylee, became emotional after seeing 2 photos of his daughter in the ICU, where she lay in a vegetative state, surrounded by numerous tubes, with her face barely visible. Dr. Susanna Dana testified about the severe head and facial injuries she found on Kaylee. These injuries included a dent in her skull, eye trauma, and extensive bruising on her jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks. There were also hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. Dana concluded that Kaylee's death was caused by head and facial trauma from a blunt object. However, Dr. William Anderson disagreed with this conclusion after reviewing the autopsy results. He pointed out that there were no fractures in the eye sockets, nose, or face, which suggested that Kaylee was not attacked from the front. Instead, Dr. Anderson believed that Kaylee's injuries were more consistent with a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter presented an alternative explanation, arguing that the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence to determine what happened to Kaylee Mandotti the night of the incident, making it impossible to prove Mark Howerton's involvement. During the trial, Hunter frequently highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Professor Jason Wallach from the University of Sciences in Philadelphia testified that Kaylee had a high level of MDMA, ecstasy, or Molly, in her blood when her boyfriend took her to the hospital on October 29, 2017. The presence of this substance can turn a minor head injury fatal. Hunter stated that MDMA affects people differently, causing increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalances that can lead to loss of consciousness. Mark Howerton told investigators that he and Kaylee had an argument and engaged in consensual rough intimacy before she lost consciousness, but the origin and timing of her bruises remained unexplained. In December 2019, Allison believed Mark Howerton would be found responsible for her daughter's death. However, the trial ended in a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. Mark's defense claimed Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff, leading to the hung jury in the 144th District Court, presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline. Because the jury was unable to reach a verdict, the case was dismissed, and Mark was acquitted of the charges in the first trial, leaving the case unresolved. District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, who had been handling the case from the beginning, expressed disappointment with the outcome and stated that he would review the case again. During this time, Kaylee's parents, Allison and Lawrence, began their own investigation. They gathered evidence and autopsy reports from the police and focused on a small, round bruise near their daughter's ear. They speculated that Mark might have hit her head against the car window, causing her to hit the door lock and get bruised. They hoped this new information would establish Mark's guilt. Lawrence found a similar Mercedes to Mark's and recreated the incident with photos. With the Texas Rangers' help, Lawrence got records and affidavits for an arrest warrant for assault and mischief. The records provided a detailed timeline of events leading up to Kaylee's death and evidence found during the investigation. The authorities exposed Mark Howerton's alleged deception to the Rangers and revealed the evidence that resulted in his arrest. Prosecutors described Howerton as a controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee Mandotti, took away her phone, and isolated her from friends. 2 weeks before Kaylee's death, Howerton physically assaulted her, pushing her against a brick wall and trashing her dorm room. After the incident, Kaylee asked for space, but Howerton responded with dozens of messages, including a threat to end his life. Kaylee pleaded with him not to harm himself. That evening, Howerton called Kaylee around 200 times. Later, they attended a festival, where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Howerton took Kaylee from the festival, drove her to a deserted parking lot near the Whataburger headquarters, and spent over an hour there, according to GPS camera records. Prosecutors believe that it was in this parking lot where Mark Howerton attacked and killed Kaylee Mandotti. Kaylee Mandotti's family expressed gratitude to the Texas Rangers for their diligent efforts in securing suitable criminal charges against Kaylee's alleged attacker. Mark Howerton's pre-trial began in June 2023. During the trial, the prosecution initially considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents in the hospital that showed her injuries, but ultimately decided not to use it. The prosecution took into account evidence gathered with the assistance of the Texas Rangers, despite potential complications and new disputes. Mark Howerton was found guilty of aggravated assault resulting in bodily harm that led to a lethal outcome. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a fine of $110,000, and ordered to pay restitution to Kaylee Mandotti's family. Furthermore, he was prohibited from contacting over 20 individuals connected to the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in the Wilsey County Jail and will be eligible for parole in 2033. The conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, but felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark Howerton faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide, on top of the initial manslaughter charge. The prosecution changed its strategy to build a stronger case against him. However, Kaylee's family and prosecutors were unhappy with the outcome and pushed for a retrial. Kaylee Mandotti's tragic story shows the devastating effects of violence on a young life and her family's struggle for justice. Kaylee's story is a powerful reminder of the consequences of violence against young people with promising futures. Despite the conviction, her family believes the verdict does not bring justice for their daughter. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed the university failed to inform Kaylee's guardians about Mark Howerton's destructive behavior in her dorm room and took no action against him, allowing him continued access to her daughter. It is unclear whether evidence collected by Allison and Lawrence was presented during Mark Howerton's trial. However, in 2023, he was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm, despite being acquitted of the more serious charge. Prosecutors noted that Kaylee's family was satisfied with the verdict, as it brought an end to the prolonged legal proceedings. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Okahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, He made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Seguro Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in New Leon, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez-Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children, and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their third child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family's situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her 2 young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25 with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Abril was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Abril passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Abril's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Abril death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Abril's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. Two vehicles were seen following the car carrying Abril. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired 2 experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, but further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, the man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Sainsbury, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25th, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27th, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26th, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson-Monro, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson-Monro was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson-Monro, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson-Monro provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Agnes Klavina. Agnes Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She grew up in a typical family with her parents and older sister, Greta. They sisters were extremely close, with only a couple of years between them. Their parents worked hard to provide them with a good education and support their dreams. Agnes was a lively and outgoing young girl who excelled in school, enjoyed sports, and had many friends. Her dream was to pursue a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved to travel and was skilled at organizing fun leisure activities. Her bright personality and attractive appearance also drew attention from men, who frequently complimented her. From a young age, Agnes had many admirers vying for her attention. After completing her education, Agnes worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying to become a tourism manager. At 20, she decided to leave her hometown in Latvia and move to London, seeking greater opportunities to develop her skills and talents. Her parents and older sister supported her decision, and soon after her move, Agnes met Michael Mills, a successful businessman 8 years her senior. He was well educated, owned a thriving business, and had recently opened a movie theater and entertainment complex. Agnes and Michael quickly connected and started dating. He showered her with attention, gifts, and luxury travel. They made ambitious plans for their future together, and their love seemed destined to last. Agnes's friends and family remember this as her first true love. She radiated happiness beside Michael and envisioned a future as his wife. In 2014, Agnes received a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. This opportunity required her to temporarily relocate, but she was eager to take on the challenge. Michael, unable to leave his life behind, supported her decision to sign the contract. For Agnes, this was a chance to gain valuable experience and potentially launch a new career path. Marbella, a renowned resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracts vacationers from around the world, particularly the wealthy. It's not uncommon to spot celebrities, athletes, and business leaders in the area. Klavina, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news of her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael upon her return to England. Her family was thrilled for Agnes and wished her well. In May 2014, Agnes packed lightly and moved to Spain for the season, while Michael remained in London. They stayed in touch through daily phone calls and video chats, sharing updates about their lives. Agnes was active on social media, posting daily updates, photos, and videos, which drew a large following interested in her life and work. Agnes had a vibrant and busy life, making the most of every day. After her employment contract ended, she decided to stay in Spain for a couple of months. The resort was entering its peak season, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. She discussed her plan with her Michael, who was supportive and promised to visit her for a few days since they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Agnes quickly landed a job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her lease. As planned, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her in September. During his visit, they had a great time, planned their upcoming wedding, and picked a destination for their honeymoon. Michael had to return to London after less than a week, leaving Agnes to work in Spain for another month. After that, she planned to visit her relatives in Latvia before flying to England to join her Michael. Unfortunately, these plans never came to fruition. Agnes went to the popular Costa del Sol nightclub with friends on September 6th. Earlier in the day, she had informed Michael of her plans and he approved. Agnes and her friends had a great time at the club, and Agnes even posted some photos on her online profile. She wore a striking mini dress and carried a small white clutch that night. As the night wore on and her friends prepared to leave, Agnes decided to stay a bit longer and then take a taxi home. Her friends didn't worry about her, as she was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. When they said their goodbyes and headed out, Agnes was chatting with a man who had bought her a drink and was trying to get her attention. After that night, Agnes disappeared without a trace. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. No one could recall what time she left the club, who she left with, or where she went afterwards. Agnes failed to show up at work the next day, and attempts to contact her were unsuccessful as her phone was turned off. Her colleagues and friends immediately raised concerns, but the police were slow to respond to the missing persons report. As the day drew to a close, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother to report that he had been unable to reach his fiancée all day, which was unusual. The following day, Agnes's parents and Michael jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report her disappearance, but they were informed that a missing persons report could only be filed in person by a relative. Undeterred, Michael and Agnes's family booked the next available flight to Marbella. It wasn't until 5 days after Agnes's disappearance that her family was able to file a missing persons report. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment, which appeared to be untouched, as if she had simply stepped out for a short time. Her documents, money, and expensive jewelry were still in place, the refrigerator was stocked with prepared meals, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had been preparing to go out, likely to the club on the night she vanished. To aid in the search, Agnes's friends and family distributed flyers with her picture throughout the city, and the media picked up the story, featuring it on TV news programs and the front pages of local newspapers. The police reviewed footage from CCTV cameras inside and outside the entertainment venue, but encountered a setback. The files had already been deleted. However, with the help of specialists, they were able to recover the recordings. One of the restored videos, taken by a camera near the parking lot exit, showed Agnes leaving the club around 6 a.m. with a man. It was clear that she did not leave voluntarily. The final footage, which showed Agnes alive, was thoroughly examined by experts. However, the more they studied the footage, the more alarming it became. Agnes was seen being led by a man to the parking lot, clearly under duress. He had a tight grip on her waist, and Agnes looked frightened. She attempted to break free multiple times and appeared to be saying something emotional, but he persisted in leading her to a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows. As he forced Agnes into the car, it became clear that another person was already inside. Meanwhile, the first man got into the driver's seat. Agnes temporarily managed to open the car door and tried to escape, but he who had been standing next to her, likely the doorman, intervened and pushed her back into the car at the driver's signal. In return for his assistance, the driver appeared to hand the doorman something, presumably a cash reward. Agnes's phone was turned off 6 minutes after she got into the car, and it was never turned back on. The vehicle's subsequent movements couldn't be tracked because there were no CCTV cameras along the route. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last people to see Agnes before she went missing. Despite this, the case was shrouded in secrecy from the start. Everyone involved in the investigation signed confidentiality agreements, and information was kept from the press and even Agnes's loved ones. For the first few months, Agnes's parents and Michael were left in the dark, with only vague updates that the investigation was ongoing and that it was too early to draw conclusions. As time passed without any word from Agnes, hope began to dwindle. Agnes's fiancé, Michael, periodically gave interviews pleading for help in finding her, but no one ever came forward with information. It wasn't until 6 months later that Agnes's relatives were finally shown footage from the club's cameras and given the names of the 3 men who had last been in contact with her. Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy British millionaire, was identified as he who forcibly removed Agnes from a club and pushed her into a car. Wesley Capper was accompanied by his longtime friend, Craig Porter, who had no specific occupation and had previously been on the police's radar. A third man, Cyan Usman, a dark-skinned doorman, was also in the car. Under interrogation, all 3 men claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had voluntarily gotten into the car. According to Wesley Capper, he and a friend had met Agnes at a club and approached her to strike up a conversation. Wesley Capper claimed that Agnes was already intoxicated, but this contradicts the testimony of her friends. He also stated that Agnes had accepted a drink from him and his friend. Capper then invited Agnes to continue the party at his luxurious country home, which she allegedly agreed to. However, Wesley Capper claims that Agnes changed her mind once they were in the car and asked to be dropped off in the middle of the road, stating that she would take a cab home. Wesley Capper claimed that he dropped Agnes off at her requested location, which was an unlit stretch of road with no CCTV cameras. Craig Porter couldn't confirm or deny Wesley Capper's statement about Agnes's presence in their car. According to Porter's own admission, he was also extremely drunk and didn't know how or when Agnes got into the vehicle. He fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and only woke up to find Agnes was no longer in the car. The doorman, Cyan Usman, confirmed that Agnes was intoxicated, but he couldn't say if she voluntarily got into the car. However, he did say that when the car moved, Agnes opened the door and nearly fell out. The driver then asked him to close the door, for which he received a large tip. When questioned, Cyan Usman said he didn't think Agnes's attempt to get out of the car was an escape attempt. In his opinion, she might have accidentally opened the door due to her intoxication. He also noted that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help during the incident. The security footage clearly shows Wesley Capper forcibly leading Agnes to the car, holding her by the waist and wrist. However, Wesley's defense is that Agnes was dizzy and he was only holding her to prevent her from falling. Later in the investigation, another unsettling video came to light, shot in the south of Spain, specifically at the Porta de la Dua in the Seu Grande Marina. The footage was of the luxury yacht belonging to John Capper, a millionaire and the father of one of the suspects. Dated September 10th, just 4 days after Agnes went missing, it showed Wesley Capper and 2 other men boarding the yacht. Notably, they carried a heavy suitcase and what appeared to be a rolled-up carpet. However, when questioned about this footage, Wesley Capper explained that he and his friends had traveled to the yacht simply to have a good time. He claimed the suitcase was packed with their belongings and what seemed to be a carpet was actually bedding. Wesley Capper failed to account for where everything had gone, considering none of these items were seen upon their return. The investigators meticulously searched the yacht and the automobile, only to find nothing of consequence because both vehicles had been thoroughly cleaned, thus destroying any possible DNA evidence. Interestingly, during this exhaustive search, a blonde hair was found in a car trunk, although determining its origin was not feasible as the hair itself had strangely disappeared over the course of the investigation, marking another puzzle within this intriguing case. A few hours after Agnes was last seen in the defendant's car, Wesley Capper made several calls to emergency services, but hung up each time without waiting for an answer. It seemed as though he was afraid or uncertain about what to do. Wesley Capper claimed he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Agnes family argued that Agnes was likely already dead, and her body was probably at the bottom of the sea, hidden in the suitcase the suspects had brought on board the yacht. He also believed that the case had been intentionally delayed, giving the suspects ample time to destroy any evidence that could prove their guilt. It wasn't until a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance that Wesley Capper, Porter, and Usman were finally brought to trial. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, no further charges could be made. This decision outraged Agnes's relatives, but the judge stood firm. In 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, the three men were brought to trial again. Despite the prolonged period, they continued to deny their guilt, claiming that Agnes voluntarily got into the car. The prosecutor argued that the doorman should be considered an accomplice for helping the defendants drive the victim away. The doorman, Usman, could have faced a 5-year prison sentence. Instead, he defended himself, stating that he was a suspect due to his skin color and lack of access to a good lawyer. He claimed that he sent all his earnings to a starving family in Africa. Wesley Capper and lawyers argued that their clients were only guilty of persuading Agnes to get into the car, not forcing her. They believed that Agnes was dropped off on the road as requested, but was possibly kidnapped and killed by someone else while waiting for a cab. The judge's verdict was met with surprise and anger from Agnes's relatives, as none of the defendants received any punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges. Wesley Capper was given a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnes's intoxication to coax her into his car, and Porter received a 6-month sentence for aiding Wesley Capper's actions. However, they received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnes's family £101,000 in compensation. Agnes's family was unhappy with the outcome and decided to appeal. It later came to light that the defendants had both committed further offenses while awaiting the court's decision. Wesley Capper, who was intoxicated by alcohol and drugs at the time, hit and killed a woman with his vehicle and then fled the scene. Meanwhile, Porter and a friend, who were also intoxicated, stole a car after violently assaulting its owner. Wesley Capper received a surprisingly lenient sentence of probation for his serious crime, thanks to his lawyer's skilled defense. As part of his sentence, he paid a substantial amount of compensation to the family of she he had killed in a car accident. In contrast, Porter was not as fortunate and was sent to jail, although the exact length of his sentence is not publicly known. Nearly 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the prime suspect in her case finally faced consequences. However, it wasn't the law that caught up with Wesley Capper, but his own destructive lifestyle. Years of substance abuse took a serious toll on his health. During the -19 pandemic, Capper was hospitalized, and after beginning to recover from the illness, he suffered a stroke. He passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. At that time, Agnes's parents appealed to the court again, but unfortunately, the suspect had since passed away and could no longer face prosecution. Despite this development, the case was still before the Supreme Court, although a new turn of events would arise 9 years later, long after Agnes's fate had been presumed, her body never found, alive or dead. Following this, her parents, sister, Michael, and their lawyer converged on a plausible theory. It suggested that the perpetrators had likely disposed of Agnes's body in a suitcase that was secretly boarded on a yacht, eventually dropped in a distant, undisclosed part of the open ocean. In mid-June, a gardener at the exclusive Lida Golf Club in the Costa del Sol region discovered a mysterious object near the coast while cleaning the area. Upon closer inspection, the object turned out to be an old, badly damaged suitcase. The gardener did not attempt to open it and instead called the police. When law enforcement officers opened the suitcase, they found human remains inside. Further examination revealed that the remains belonged to she, approximately 25 to 35 years old at the time of her death. It was also determined that the suitcase had been submerged in water for around 10 years before washing up on the shore. Based on these findings, the police hypothesized that the remains might belong to Agnes, a woman who had gone missing 9 years ago. To confirm this theory, investigators are conducting DNA tests to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found in the suitcase. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel O'Reilly. Rachel O'Reilly was born in 1974 in County Dublin, Ireland. Her biological parents are unknown, but she was adopted at a young age by Rose and Jim Calley, who raised her along with their 4 other adopted children. Rachel was a responsible and driven child. She excelled in school, played sports, helped with household chores, and never caused any trouble. As she grew up, she became a sociable, open, and exceptionally kind person. She got along with everyone and avoided conflict whenever possible. As a teenager, Rachel was a skilled softball player, participating in numerous competitions and setting local records. Her closest relationship was with her adoptive mother, Rose, with whom she shared all her secrets and stayed in close touch even after she got married and had children of her own. Rachel decided to pursue a degree in marketing from a local university after completing high school. She also landed a job as a salesperson at a city department store and continued to play sports for a local team in her free time. Joe O'Reilly, born in 1972 in County Dublin, Joe grew up in a simple family as the second child of his parents, with an older sister. His parents instilled in him the value of hard work and self-reliance, not spoiling him or his sister. Joe was a tall and athletic boy who enjoyed playing softball. After high school, he chose to study advertising through correspondence and took a job as a manager at a department store. A few months later, Rachel would start working at the same store. Joe was 19 years old when he first met Rachel, who was just 17. He was immediately drawn to her and introduced himself, but despite being charmed by her bright smile and blonde hair, she refused to go on a date with him. Undeterred, Joe began to try to win her over, showering her with compliments and small gifts, such as flowers and chocolates, which he would leave at her workstation in the morning. However, no matter how hard he tried, Rachel remained unimpressed. The entire department store staff was entertained by Joe's attempts to get Rachel's attention, and it even became a running joke. Despite initial challenges, Joe persevered. He made an effort to read Rachel's favorite book, hoping to find common ground for conversation. However, it wasn't until he discovered her passion for softball that he made significant progress. Joe attended one of her games, joined in during practice, and showcased his skills on the field. As a result, the team won, and Rachel was finally impressed by his determination and athletic abilities. She agreed to go on a date with him, and their relationship began to blossom. As they spent more time together, Joe went to great lengths to prove his commitment and affection. He planned a surprise trip to Paris, a city he knew Rachel would love. In a romantic gesture, he proposed to her at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Rachel was overwhelmed by the surprise and happily accepted his proposal. She thought she had found her perfect match, a true prince who would make her happy for the rest of her life. A few years after their wedding, they had 2 sons. They moved to a peaceful and scenic area in Scotland, where they bought a spacious and cozy home, ideal for raising their children. After the birth of their first son, Rachel left her job to focus on taking care of her family. 2 years later, their second son was born, and Rachel dedicated herself to raising their children. Meanwhile, Joe secured a job at an advertising agency, specializing in outdoor advertising, which proved to be a successful career move for him. Those who knew Joe personally described him as a confident, driven, and charming individual. At work, he demonstrated his responsibility, expertise, and attention to detail. As they grew older and started attending kindergarten, Rachel began working as a distributor for a popular cosmetics company and selling household goods to earn extra income. This job allowed her to interact more with her neighbors, who praised her as a wonderful mother and a kind, open person. Meanwhile, Joe became increasingly absent from home, only returning to sleep, shower, and change clothes. He attributed his absence to his demanding work schedule and an upcoming promotion he was eagerly anticipating. Rachel supported Joe as best she could, but as time passed, they started to drift apart, and their family relationships began to deteriorate significantly. A disturbing incident occurred in the summer of 2004 when an anonymous person sent a letter to Child Protective Services, falsely accusing Rachel of being a bad mother who mistreated her sons. In response, a special commission visited their home to investigate the allegations. Although the investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing, and relatives and neighbors described Rachel as a loving and caring mother, the malicious letter damaged her reputation. On the morning of Monday, October 4, 2004, the O'Reilly household began as usual. Joe, the father, left for work at dawn while his wife, Rachel, and their sons were still asleep. Throughout the day, Joe tried to contact Rachel by texting and calling her, but she didn't respond. He then called their home phone, but the answering machine picked up, and Joe left a worried message, asking Rachel to call him back as soon as possible. Later that afternoon, Joe received a call from the kindergarten teacher, informing him that Rachel had not arrived to pick up their sons, which was unusual. Joe then called his mother-in-law, Rose, to ask if she knew Rachel's whereabouts. When Rose said she didn't know, Joe asked her to check on their house and see if everything was okay. Meanwhile, Joe went to the kindergarten to pick up the children. When Rose arrived at the house, she found Rachel's car in the yard, indicating that Rachel was home. However, the house was dark and quiet, and Rose's calls went unanswered. As Rose entered the house, she was immediately struck by the scene of chaos before her. Cabinets and drawers were open, with their contents scattered all over the floor, giving the appearance of a robbery. Upon entering the bedroom, Rose's was met with a horrific sight. Rachel lay lifeless on the floor, surrounded by a massive pool of her own blood. The walls, furniture, and even the ceiling were splattered with blood, and Rachel's tangled, bloody hair partially concealed her skull. In some places, the bare bones of her skull were visible. Rose rushed to her daughter, hoping against hope that she was still alive and could be saved. But when she touched Rachel's arm, she felt it was cold and stiff. It was clear that Rachel had been dead for hours, and there was nothing that could be done to help her. Overcome with grief and unable to collect her thoughts, Rose began screaming and calling for help. She then rushed to the phone to dial the police. Her screams alerted the neighbors, one of whom was a doctor. The doctor was the first to examine the body and confirm that Rachel was beyond help. When Joe arrived at the house, he was met with a crowd of people who had already gathered there. Upon learning of his wife's death, he was overcome with grief, screaming and running inside the house, exclaiming that he didn't believe the news. In the bedroom, he became hysterical beside his wife's body, crying and vowing to kill the person responsible for her murder. According to the police officers who responded to the scene, the crime was one of the most brutal they had ever encountered. The victim, Rachel, had been beaten to death with a heavy blunt object with incredible force. It appeared that she had been attacked from behind, as she showed no signs of having tried to resist or fight back. At first, the scene resembled a robbery, but the investigators' instincts suggested that the brutality of the attack indicated a personal motive or intense dislike. However, it was unclear who would have wanted to harm the Rachel, who was a mother of two. The detectives began by interviewing Rachel's family members and neighbors, who all confirmed that she was a friendly person with no known enemies or conflicts. None of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious on the day of the murder. Joe provided an alibi, stating that he was at the bus depot on the other side of town for work, which could be corroborated by a coworker. The scene looked like a robbery, but nothing valuable was taken. A 1,000 euro note was left untouched on the bedside table, and another stash of money was found in a kitchen cupboard, also untouched. A jewelry box on the dressing table was disturbed, but only a pair of chains and earrings were missing, found separately in a drawer. The homeowner reported that a digital camera, silverware, and one of his dumbbells, likely the murder weapon, were missing. The investigation found the situation suspicious. The house was in disarray, and Rachel was brutally murdered, yet only a few items were taken. Joe, answering police questions, was visibly shaken, crying, and feverish. However, one investigator believed that Joe's behavior seemed more like nervous excitement than grief or shock. When asked if his wife might have had an affair, Joe's demeanor changed, and he confidently denied it. He then added that he had not cheated on his wife, but this statement seemed unconvincing. A bag containing stolen items from the house was discovered in the bushes, 2 miles from the crime scene. The bag held a camera, silverware, and a few pieces of jewelry, all of which were on the list of stolen items compiled by Joe. This new evidence led investigators to rule out the possibility of a robbery and reclassify the case as a premeditated murder. As a result, Joe, who had been trying to appear grief-stricken, became the prime suspect. His attempts to convey pain and sorrow seemed insincere, raising suspicions about his involvement in the crime. Joe didn't have an alibi to present, so the detectives had to investigate the details of his day to piece together what happened. According to Joe, he started the morning by stopping at the gym, a routine he followed regularly. The surveillance cameras in the gym's parking lot and inside the gym confirmed his presence. After his gym visit, Joe drove to the office and then headed to a remote bus station in the city to check on the placement of advertisements on buses. A colleague corroborated Joe's account, recalling a phone conversation they had around that time. The investigators then visited Joe's workplace to inspect his computer. This led to a significant discovery. Joe's email contained some suspicious messages that he had partially deleted. Specialists were able to recover the deleted emails, and the police became convinced they were on the right track. Most of the recovered emails were exchanges with Joe's friend and sister, in which he frequently complained about his wife, Rachel, using derogatory language and profanity. Joe's wife had not been attractive to him for a long time, and in fact, he felt a strong sense of disgust towards her. Meanwhile, investigators discovered a suspicious correspondence between Joe and a female colleague named Nikki Pell. Their communication suggested that they were more than just friends and warranted further questioning. Nikki Pell worked at the same advertising company as Joe and was 10 years his senior. Despite their age difference, they had begun an affair. It was unclear when exactly their workplace romance started, but it was evident that Joe spent a significant amount of time with Nikki, often staying late into the evenings and even nights. Joe's wife was unaware of this and was misled into believing that he was busy with work. What was even more alarming was the content of Joe's messages to Nikki, in which he promised that they would soon be together, referring to her as a potential stepmother to his children with his wife, Rachel. Such messages raised suspicions, especially considering that in the event of a divorce, the children would likely remain with their mother. Joe initially denied having an affair, but when faced with irrefutable evidence of his infidelity, he was forced to admit to secretly dating Nikki for some time. Although they had reportedly broken up for over a week before the incident, this revelation raised questions. Following the discovery of the body, the O'Reilly house was sealed off as a crime scene, and no one was allowed to enter while the police conducted a thorough investigation. During this time, Joe stayed with his sister, and the children stayed with their grandparents. At the funeral, Joe was surprisingly calm and appeared to avoid the casket containing his deceased wife's body. When it was his turn to say goodbye, he did so hastily and without emotion. As he left, he appeared unconcerned, saying that the casket could be closed and buried once the family was allowed to return home. When they returned, everything in the house appeared to be in the same condition as the day of the murder, except for the body on the floor. Joe asked his in-laws to accompany him to the scene of the crime, and they agreed, thinking he needed their emotional support. However, As they walked around the room where Rachel had been murdered, Joe began to speculate about the killer's actions. He graphically described the attack, pointing to dried blood spatters and reenacting the blows with his arms. Joe suggested that the perpetrator might have washed his hands and the crime weapon in the bathroom before taking it with him. Although his detailed and unsettling account seemed like an attempt to process his grief, his parents-in-law couldn't shake the feeling that he was reenacting the crime. Rose, in particular, secretly suspected that Joe might have been the one who killed their daughter. Immediately following the funeral, Joe began aggressively seeking media attention. He granted numerous interviews and even invited reporters into his home, providing them with a tour of the crime scene while recounting the events that transpired. 3 weeks after the tragedy, the Rachel loved ones agreed to participate in a television program about the crime. However, while Rachel's parents appeared to be overcome with grief, Joe's behavior on set was remarkably different. He interacted with the makeup team, showing concern for his on-camera appearance, and during breaks, he eagerly accepted and enjoyed the offered snacks and coffee, behaving more like a celebrity than a grieving family member. The police, who were still looking at Joe, decided to follow him and found that from the set he went straight to his mistress Nikki, who spent the night. By that time, the last doubts that he was the killer had already been dispelled, and it remained only to collect irrefutable evidence for the court. Collecting evidence proved to be a time-consuming and challenging task. The main piece of evidence, the murder weapon, remained elusive. Despite this, investigators accumulated enough supplementary evidence. Initially, 2 key witnesses, Nikki and Joe's colleague who corroborated his alibi, faced possible imprisonment for perjury, leading them to recant their earlier statements. Nikki revealed that her relationship with Joe never actually ended, they continued to see each other in secret. Rachel, who discovered their ongoing connection, got into a significant argument with Joe and his wife shortly before the tragedy. In contrast, Joe's colleague, although previously vouching for his whereabouts, could not confidently attest that Joe was at the bus station across town at the time of his wife's murder. He unknowingly corroborated his friend's story at his request, unaware that Joe was a suspect in the crime at the time. Emails retrieved from Joe's computer, in which he made disparaging comments about his wife and planned a future with his mistress and children, were also submitted as evidence in the case. Joe made a deliberate attempt to create an alibi by going to the gym and ensuring he was caught on camera. He then informed his colleagues that he would be unavailable due to a work commitment in another part of the city. However, instead of going to the bus station as claimed, Joe went home, armed himself with a dumbbell, and hid in the bedroom, waiting for his wife to return from taking the children to kindergarten. He launched a surprise attack on her from behind, leaving her no opportunity to defend herself. After committing the crime, Joe, who later admitted his actions, cleaned the blood from himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom next to the bedroom. He then changed his clothes, scattered his belongings around the house to make it appear like a robbery had occurred, and headed to work. While on his way to the office, Joe got rid of the items he had taken, disposed of the bloody clothes and dumbbells, and made several attempts to cover his tracks by calling his wife's phone, sending her messages, and leaving voicemails asking her to call him back. At the office, Joe exhibited unusual behavior, appearing overly excited and showing signs of nervousness, as evident from his slightly shaking hands. Some of his colleagues noticed his unusual behavior and asked if he was okay, but Joe seemed flustered and, instead of responding, quickly retreated to his office. Shortly after, he received a call from the daycare center informing him that no one had picked up their boys. Instead of rushing home, Joe sent his mother-in-law to discover his daughter's disfigured body first. He believed he had covered his tracks and that his guilt would be impossible to prove. However, his desire for fame and public attention ultimately worked against him. Although most of the evidence against Joe was circumstantial, he was not arrested until 2 years after the crime. His guilt was ultimately proven by tracing his movements on the day of the murder, using data from a cell phone he had kept with him. Notably, at the time of the murder, Joe's cell phone signal was tracked to the home, a fact later confirmed by phone records. Furthermore, it was revealed during the trial that the anonymous letter sent to Child Protective Services, which made false accusations against Rachel, was actually written by Joe's mother at his request. Joe's motive for the murder was to gain sole custody of the children in the event of a divorce. To achieve this, he attempted to discredit Rachel by portraying her as an abusive mother. However, social services found no evidence to support these claims, and Joe decided to take more drastic action. Joe showed no remorse in the courtroom, smiling and chatting with his lawyers as if he was confident he would be acquitted. However, in the summer of 2007, the court delivered a guilty verdict and sentenced him to life in prison. Despite the defense team's efforts to appeal the decision, all their attempts were unsuccessful. Interestingly, Joe's relationship with his mistress, Nikki, continued even after his imprisonment. She visited him regularly for many years, but they suddenly lost contact in 2022. Throughout his imprisonment, Joe has maintained his innocence and has been a model inmate, never causing any trouble. He hopes that this good behavior will eventually make him eligible for parole.